related. Is there a way to teach about the diverse backgrounds and cultures that Prince William County students come from without what some believe are the negatives of critical race theory? If not critical race theory, then what? And Dr. Jory, since we always end with you, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. I think it's we need to trust our educators. They're professionally trained, and we need to definitely give them that space to navigate and make instructional decisions for their students. And definitely, we need to integrate curriculum that intertwines everyone's voice so that our students feel validated and are represented in what's being taught. And I think, we're kind of in this nebulous zone of, pushing teachers to really reevaluate what they're going to teach at this point. And that's a heavy burden on an educator, because an educator definitely understands and has a nuanced understanding of their students and their skill levels. We've been talking about reading skills, their lexical, their lexile levels, their proficiencies, and their passions and their needs as well. And we are talking about not just the external manifestation of all of those, but then internally, are we able to connect with the students? And if we are going to completely deplete our curriculum of multiple voices, then we have already alienated ourselves from them. And I feel that's ethically wrong for an educator.
Thanks, Dr. Jory. And Paul, I saw your hand next, if you want to chime in.
Sure. How is it done? I lived in Maine for a while when my kids were young. They simply had a week-long heritage festival. Parents came in, presented about their backgrounds. They talked about the ethnic backgrounds, histories, cultures. They shared all that stuff, and it covered everyone and just got it out of the way. And then went back to focusing on core competence, the core academic competencies. I think the problem we have here is there is an emotional argument versus a factual argument. Stanford University in 2016 did a broad study on whether or not there are significant or actual academic improvements by embracing things like SEL, CRI, et cetera, et cetera. The result, and this was not a right-wing university, the result of the study was this, that we don't know, we don't have any data to show that it has any substantial results. Where there are results, there's usually some academic rigor program in parallel, and there's no control group in order to test whether or not this way grades go up versus this way grades go up. So our children are being used in an experiment because there is no data at all. I've looked. I took 6 weeks to try to find it, me and my staff. It does not exist to show that these things actually produce real adult level outcomes. And I think we need to ask the right question and get out of the weeds and set aside our emotions and say, this is what our schools are here for. This is what the parents all agree that they're here for. And there are those things that parents agree that don't agree that they're here for. And those things should be excluded. And we should focus on what we have in common and build on that. That's how you build a better country, a better America, a better family, better children. I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
But doctor, I love you.
I saw Martha's hand next, so we'll go to her, and then Atif will have the last word on this question. So Martha, go ahead.
Okay, so this is a kind of question that is difficult to answer because it makes me understand that the person asking it doesn't really understand what critical race theory is. So instead of trying to explain 100 years of how we got here. I mean, that's really what you have to start to do, is you have to go back and try to understand the history of critical race theory, which comes from critical race theory, which comes from the Frankfurt School, which comes from Marx and Hegel. So it is a complex, complicated, the hours I've spent, and I think Paul too, trying to understand how we got here, you know, I can't do in 90 seconds, but critical race theory is not about multiculturalism. It's not. It's another avenue by critical theorists to dismantle Western culture. It was another, they figured out another way to do it. And they're very successful. They're winning. This has been around since the 1960s, really, when Derek Bell first started critical legal studies. And I just want to address Secretary Carney and say that, and answer your question, we're worked up about this because, and I wrote it down, because we're worked up about the fact that teachers and students are being indoctrinated into social justice activism for socialist revolution. That is the stated goal of critical social justice, critical race theory, critical queer theory, all of them. I think everyone should be worked up about it, but it's coming in subtle, so people don't recognize it. And people think it's, you know, you're racist to fight it, or you're homophobic to fight it, or you don't want, you just don't want to teach about slavery. None of that is.
Thank you. That's a fair point, Ms. Constantine. Please call me Atif. I want to be thoughtful in this response. So if I go over my time, I apologize. But I think you do raise a profound point about, you know, the intent and the Marxism. I get all that, but the folks who are actually really concerned, like I was in my position, I taught in Dale City for 10 years in Prince William County, know Prince William County really, really well. This is even before I became Secretary of Education, but even when I was Secretary of Education, I had access to a lot of information and data. And we talk about data, well, let's talk about data. In Prince William, whether it's the East End or the West End, Black children across the county, whether they're affluent or not, are still 3 times more likely to get a discipline referral compared to their peers, right? That's data set. That's something that Virginia Tech did a study. That's not my numbers making up. You can go look at it. That was issued by JLARC, by a Republican legislator. It was done statewide, right? So that's one example. After Donald Trump got elected, a registrar, what used to be Stonewall Jackson High School's Unity Reed, sent out a letter to 300 families asking for children to produce their documentation status. There was a series of attacks on Muslim girls in our schools where their hijabs were being yanked off in multiple schools. I actually, matter of fact, did a big roundtable at the mosque with our superintendent. Actually, school board had to address it because it was happening. So systematically, a lot of these things happened with COVID. I got numerous complaints from across the county in Prince William about Asian American children were getting bullied. So these oppressive things happen. We just can't deny them. They're evident. These are facts that lead to looking for good solutions. So when we talk about, let's get rid of DEI, let's not talk about social emotional learning, let's not talk about all of these other things, and we tie that into CRT and conflate these things, that is disingenuous.
Time's up.
Thanks, Sherry. And, you know, I'll leave it to you and Cynthia. Do we have time to get to a few audience questions?
I don't think we've been able to get to any of them yet, but Van,